So a little while back, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I was out to eat with my wife and her family for someone's birthday at kind of a larger chain restaurant. And while I was previously pretty involved in the conversation, I started to become somewhat uninterested in what they were talking about, as they were talking about The Bachelorette, of all things.
Is it your favorite show, though? I mean,
Yeah, obviously. That was until somebody made a remark about how all of the remaining contestants, I think there were maybe 3 or 4, something like that, all of them happened to have a black father and a white mother.
well, all the remaining contestants, and then the Bachelorette herself, too.
Yes, so
Yeah.
that, yeah, highly critical there. And someone noted this in quite a surprised voice and asked the question basically, what are the odds of that? And after thinking about this for a second or so, the conversation seemed to have died down. I commented something along the lines of, probably higher than you would think. I said this because I thought there were a number of variables that likely weren't being taken into consideration. For instance, The Bachelorette happens to have a black father and a white mother, as detailed earlier. People tend to be attracted to others like themselves, whether this be life experience, education level, or genetic makeup. So the likelihood that the remaining contestants would be biracial, particularly half black and half white, may be higher than people would initially expect, given The Bachelorette is as well. Regardless of these statistics, though, she may simply have a kind of quote-unquote type, as many in the dating world say. This could make her more attracted to or more predisposed to be attracted to someone who is half black and half white. Additionally, there's an underlying variable amongst all of these people, which is that they're all here because the Bachelorette wanted them to be around. Statistically speaking, in the US at least, black men marry white women more frequently than black women marry white men. In fact, black males marrying white American females is the second most common interracial marriage in the US, where 8.5% of black American men were married to a white spouse compared to 3.9% of black American women who were married to a white spouse in 2010. As a result, the likelihood that the remaining contestants would all have a black father and a white mother is not as small as one would initially think.
Well, it's higher than that they would have a black mother and a white father, right?
Correct. So you can start off by saying the likelihood that all the people that remain are half black and half white is informed by her making the decision to keep people around. This could be because they have similar life experiences. This could be she's physically attracted to people like that. It could be that she is looking for someone like her father, right? Or like her mother, or someone who exemplifies what she's seen growing up, right? Plenty of people have that in their lives. So that informs whether or not these people would have the racial makeup that they do. And then on top of that, when you look at the statistics, I think if you add it up, it's probably, the likelihood that someone who is half black and half white has a black father and a white mother is almost twice as likely, or more than twice as likely, as having a white father and a black mother.
You look at like these bachelorette shows, and like a lot of times I feel ashamed that I know this because I've watched enough of this show. Not proud to say, but when you get to the final few, like very often you can tell the person has a type. So
Sure.
the likelihood that the final few look similar, not always, but that's not just chance. So there's that. But then it's also on top of that, okay, when you do have those people who all look a similar, racial makeup or whatever, then the chance that that would be black father, white mother is actually higher than the other way around. So there's like two levels of, you think that maybe on the surface this looks like, oh wow, just a random chance thing that happened. But no, there are actually factors behind the scenes that are making that more likely.
Yeah. And I'm not necessarily asserting that there's an easy way to quantify this, because I'm sure the Bachelorette, right, if she found Mr. Perfect and Mr. Perfect didn't happen to have, I don't know, insert physical characteristic here that she wanted, she very well still may end up with him. But the likelihood that she is going to end up with someone that fits into a specific type does affect things.
Well, and on top of that, you could even say the producers who put on this show, when they're going out and picking people to be on her season, there's also a level of selection, and they're already picking a number of people who fit maybe the kind of criteria that she'd be looking for. I mean, I don't know how behind the scenes of these shows work, but I have to assume that you tell them some things about what you want, and they always throw in the random people for the drama, right? I almost am convinced that those people are like paid actors to go and like just stir up stuff on these shows. But
Okay.
it's also, but the point that I'm making is all the people that you start with as potential suitors is also not just a random sampling
Yeah.
of the population. Like there's some selection that goes into that too.
Sure. I don't know that that selection necessarily applies in this specific case, given the comments were about like parental ethnic makeup. But yeah, to your point.
Well, I think it does, because that season of the show, there were a lot of people who were black or biracial with black.
Okay.
Like a lot of people, more than you would see in the general population. So I'm saying you're already like, you have that has been selected from this pool.
I wonder if they sit down and talk with the contestant and say, oh, okay, what's your type? What are you looking for? Maybe they do,
right.
Maybe they don't. But either way,
I feel like there's probably some level of that. But either way, like, you go out and pick 4 random people from the general public, and the chances that all those 4 people are going to have a black father and a white mother is pretty low. But that's not what we're saying here, because we have to understand the setup and the chances that all of those 4 people now have similar ethnic makeups and, and backgrounds. That is a completely different equation than 4 random people in the population.
Yeah. So that's why at the beginning I basically said, if you remember, I didn't necessarily say, oh, it's wildly likely. I just said more likely than you would initially think.
Probably more likely than you're thinking, especially if you're being this surprised by it.
Because there are a number of underlying variables that make the initial assumption incomplete. So I think, you need to look at those underlying variables, especially when they're not random. In this case, human preference plays a role, and that on top of population statistics. So ultimately, if we can draw a line between the Bachelorette's preferences or genetic societal statistics, we can better understand the true likelihood of something like this occurring. You may not be able to quantify that still, but you can begin to guesstimate in your head and understand that it's maybe more likely than you were originally anticipating.